Some of the big questions as I go further down this rum journey and pick up more and more of you awesome new rum fans is comparing rums. Steve, what's my opinion on this versus this? Which sort of starter rum should I get? We might be talking Havana Especial versus Mount Gay, or we might be talking something like Appleton versus Santiago de Cuba. All of these are now becoming more and more available in the UK supermarkets. Now, of course, I could give you an answer, but it's not all that clear cut, because first you need to start to understand some rum basics. Hey rum fans, I'm Steve the Barman and I'm here to help you on your rum journey by mainly focusing on rums under £50. So what are these basics? Now I do have to point out, these are becoming more and more irrelevant as time goes on, as the rum industry grows, as people get more, or distillers and brands get more curious and start experimenting with different styles of production. But when it comes to the bigger, more established brands and distilleries that you'll see on your high streets, a lot of these basics will still ring true. So today I'm going to be talking about that sort of old way of classifying rums: English, Spanish and French, or rum, ron, and rum. And no, I don't necessarily mean rum that comes from the UK or rum that comes from Spain. I'm talking the colonies out in the Caribbean where a rum sort of kind of originated from. Now, as I say, a lot of these characteristics that I'm going to be talking about are still prevalent today, but be prepared because there is a hell of a lot of crossover these days. However, as I'm mainly trying to talk to you guys, the new beginners on your rum journeys, not the rum lifers that have had 10 years under their belt that know their way around rum, but for the beginners, it is those inherent questions like Havana versus Appleton versus Mount Gay. Like, which one do you buy? Where do you start first? Now, we all know taste is very subjective. What I like, you may not like. So trying to guide you on a specific taste or a specific rum to buy is pretty damn pointless. Instead, what I want to do is try and help you, try and guide you with specific styles. So to start off with, let's look at English styles of rum and typical examples of English styles of rum. English colonies from the Caribbean. We've got, just purely for examples of entry-level beginner rums that you kind of might be looking at, we've got a Jamaican example here. I've got Appleton. We've got a Barbados example. I've got Mount Gay. We've got St. Lucia here and Chairman's Reserve, St. Lucian Distillers. We've got El Dorado from Guyana, and I've also got a very empty bottle of Angostura. These are what we would typically class as English styles of rum. Now, again, all of these, just these five alone, these five are going to taste completely different, but there are some underlying sort of similarities between them. For example, they are distilled from molasses. All right, again, this is where the lines get blurry because there is a little bit of kind of cane juice gone into some of the Chairman's Reserve as well. But typically English styles are molasses, which is a byproduct of kind of sugar cane, and inherently they are kind of pot still rums. Now, talking about pot still, that's a question, that's a topic for another day. But just kind of bear in mind, English styles of rum typically generically would have been pot stills. However, we know there's quite a lot of hybrid stills coming out there now, or column stills are making their way to some of these kind of English colony islands, your Barbados, your Jamaica and all that. So that is not true for everything. I'm just talking typical, sort of, especially at this kind of basic entry level rum. Now, the big difference is to kind of note on this, I would say English styles of rum will generally start at 40% ABV, but even some of the like the 5-year-olds, some of the sort of, especially when you get up to like 12-year-olds, they all are going to be at the sort of 43s, 46s. And when you get into the real kind of big boy rums, the real sort of sipping rums, they will be up there at your 46s minimum to sort of like 53s, 54s, 55% ABVs. But I very rarely, if ever, I can't even think of one, have thought of an English style of rum that is less than 40% ABV. And the other big kind of generic flavour kind of profile that I would kind of say, English styles to rum, to me, this is kind of my take on it, English styles of rum generically give you a kind of a heavier type of rum from that pot still, from that molasses, but also kind of like a sort of, they have got those tropical elements to it, like Barbados is kind of renowned for like pineapple-y coconut vibes, Jamaica's kind of renowned for pineapple again, but kind of banana vibes in there as well. But you know, there's a complete crossover, but I would say more tropical fruit, but they do also sort of have a slight peppery kind of spice bite to it. And I don't mean spiced rum, I just mean this lovely sort of peppery tingle that goes through their rum. Now let's talk generically about Spanish styles of rum, or Ron, R-O-N. We start off with Cuban. I've got 3 examples of Cuban rum here. We've got Havana, probably the big famous one. We've got Ron Santiago de Cuba, but we've also got one of my favourites, Ron Cubé. Then we obviously get into Puerto Rico as well. We've got Don Q and Bacardi as examples there. We could then move on to Venezuela and just the examples there. I've got Santa Teresa, I've got Pampero, and I've got everyone kind of, this one doesn't need any introductions, but Diplomatico. We hop over to the Dominican Republic and we've got examples, Matusalem, we've got Brugal, we've got Barcelo, and there's plenty more examples as well, but I'm just going to finish on Nicaragua, Flor de Caña, a lot of people's favourites because it's banging quality rum, but it is quite cheap. Now the big difference between these Spanish styles of rum and English styles of rum, and I'm talking generically and typically, even still to this day, probably rings true. They are, again, they are molasses based rums, so that byproduct of sugarcane, but they are typically column stilled rum. So English would be pot still and Spanish would be column still. Now what column still does typically, I'm going to keep emphasizing this, typically and generically, not all the time, but column still will generally give you a much lighter style of rum. You'll get sort of buttery notes, floral notes, and I'm not talking sort of really kind of grassy, but completely sort of different to those pot still characters. I would actually say on the whole, slightly sweeter styles of rum, and I don't mean because they are sweetened. Some of them are, some of them aren't. Some of them would be down to Solera aging as well, which is again another topic for another day. But generically, for me personally, column stills do kind of give you a slightly sweeter type of rum. So for me, the big difference I'm going to point out is that English style will give you that tropical vibe, that fruity vibe, whereas Spanish style probably not so much. And the other big difference, and I'm talking white rums, I had a lot of white rums there, but white rums, sometimes they will be down at 37.5%, 40%. Is very rarely you see a 43, a 47, a 50% Spanish style rum, especially at beginner entry level. And because of those ABVs, the big factor, and I've already sort of touched on it very, very quickly, the big factor I notice that Spanish style rums are, on the whole, a lot cheaper than English styles of rum. And that's because of all those variables. It's cheaper to produce, different raw ingredients, different kind of stills, everything sort of combined in there. But as I say, you know, you will find exceptions, of course you will, but on the whole, Spanish style, I would say, is inherently cheaper than English. And then we move on to French styles of rum, or rum, as it's written on the screen there with the H. Now, I don't have too many examples of French styles of rum. They are typically known as agricultural rums. They are protected by French law. Agricole can only come from certain parts of the Caribbean, French colony islands, for example. But the big difference between French style and Spanish and English style, as I've just mentioned, is kind of sugar cane juice. Okay, so it's that bit before they get the molasses. It's just pressed, squeezed sugar cane juice, which is then fermented and distilled. So the examples we can give you, I've got Clermont there from Martinique. We can also go Rum JM. Other big brand that you may have heard of, Guadeloupe, would be Damiso Rums. And while we can't technically call these agricole, we do actually sort of class Haitian rums in this, rums from Haiti, Barbancourt and Clarins. They aren't agricole, but they are rums from sugar cane juice. So inherently very, very similar. There's just French laws protecting certain methods of production, that's all. But generically speaking, when we say French styles of rum, it is a sugar cane juice rum. Open and honestly, I don't really think, unless you're sort of a direct descendant from a French family, French sort of colonies and that, I don't think that a French style of rum would be your starter rum. For example, the cheaper end of French style rum, the cheaper end of agricole, how can we put it nicely, do have this kind of funk. We should just kind of recall it. This sugarcane juice gives this kind of unmistakable funk to the flavour, to the aroma. And when you smell one, you'll know exactly what I mean. However, when we start to go up the ranks, I'd all honesty, I'd written sugarcane rums off, agricole rums off. They just weren't my bag. But again, big shout out to Big G Garant in my Discord, in my membership community. You know, he's taken me on this little sort of sugarcane juice rum kind of tour. There's some, when you go up the ages, there's some absolute belters there. But remember, I am talking at beginner entry level, and I don't really think these will be up your street. Say that sort of pungent funk, I'm just going to call it funk. There's other people in my Discord call it other things, but that pungent funk is enough to put a lot of people off. But you do get that grassy, vegetal, floral kind of aromas from these. You don't necessarily get sort of tropical fruits, tropical fruit vibe or anything like that off the rum. So less fruity. But the other thing I would say, and why I've started to fall in love with sugarcane juice rums, is that I actually find them less syrupy. And I don't mean less sweet, I just mean less viscous, less syrupy. They do have this uniqueness to them that when you start drinking, sipping aged rums, they are really, really good. Just this complete different mouthfeel to molasses-based rums. Now, to tell you specifically where to start on this journey is, as I've said, pretty impossible. Also, I will try and guide you is my personal favourites at this moment for certain types of drinks. So let's start off with the good old rum and coke. I know most people's entry points to rum. For a rum and coke, generically, I would say pick an English style of rum, but don't write off Spanish styles of rum, because I flipping well love like a Flor de Carne, a 12-year-old for a rum and coke. But as a beginner journey, that is probably a bit too expensive for your rum and coke rum. So I would sort of say stick to your Barbados, your Jamaica, your Guyana rums, your El Dorado, your Mount Gays, specifically your Appletons, your Dawleys, a bit more expensive than your Mount Gays, but I would say they are perfect rum and coke starter rum. If we're talking rum and ginger beer, the exact same is true. I honestly haven't found a Spanish style of rum yet that I really, really like with ginger beer. For me, it's always English styles of rum, and the darker, the better. And yes, darker rums will have a bit of colour, a good bit of caramel added to them, but for me, it's ginger. Rum and ginger is all about sort of English style of rum. However, when we flip that up and go for other styles of cocktails, for instance, the daiquiri and the mojito, you might have seen, if you've been following me, you might have seen a couple of videos that I put out recently about looking at daiquiris again specifically. But up until that point, I'd been very strictly in the Spanish sort of style of rum for that. Spanish styles, I do love those light, white, fresh rums for mojitos and daiquiris. They are a class apart. But as you will have seen, I have fallen in love with a couple of English styles of rum for my daiquiris, for those mojitos. But on the whole, up until now, my starter journey, a year in, up until now, I've been pretty much all about Spanish rums in my daiquiris. And then when we're talking about fruitier sort of rum cocktails, your punches, your zombies, all that sort of stuff, again, we can get some really good results from French styles of rum, from Spanish styles of rum, sorry, but I would typically point you in English style, Barbados, Jamaica, Guyana. Again, those entry-level rums I think are going to see you right for those really fun and fruity cocktails. Now, if you're at that point, even early doors, rum beginners, if you're at that point where we're talking about neat sipping, I really do think the door is wide open for any of those styles. When I first started off, I used to think I was really kind of English style of rum dominant. I really did sort of love, especially the plantation ranges, the Barbados and all that sort of stuff. But I really did think I was English. However, the more experimenting I did, I kind of do really like Spanish styles of rum. And as I've said, even a year in now, I flipping well love agricole, aged agricole rums. But, you know, beginner level, we're talking roughly 20 to 20 pounds for your rums, and for that you're going to get some decent Spanish stuff, but you're also going to get some really decent English stuff as well. So I can't really guide you too much on that. And again, it all comes back to distilleries adopting new blends, new techniques, new processes, experiment with fermentation. There's a whole rabbit hole you can go down. This is why this whole English, Spanish, French is kind of really, when we're talking about age stuff, not really appropriate, but I think it still is appropriate for entry level. But to round this all off, you know, your rum journey is personal to you. People like me can give you our opinions on how stuff tastes, but me, we don't control your taste buds. So please do not let anyone ever put you off something. Only way you can go down this rum journey and progress and find new rums is trying stuff for yourself and forming your own opinions.